All right. We'll go with that. I think that looks good. What's going on? What's going on? How are you? See a few people jumping on. Hopefully this one spins up pretty quickly. Hey, Tyrants Beware's on the live stream. What's up, buddy? How are you? I hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing good. Welcome. All right. This is Don Matthews. I'm in Don Matthews reporting mode. I've got a special report to bring you. I think hey, what's up, Phoenix? Welcome to the live stream, buddy. All right. Good afternoon. I'm Don Matthews with We the People News. And today, I'm going to tell you about a phone call that exposed the rot at the heart of Mississippi's prison system. Not the kind of rot you can smell. Not the kind that makes headlines when prisoners die from neglect, though that happens too. This is a different kind of decay. The constitutional kind. The kind that happens when the people we trust to run our prisons decide that prisoner rights are negotiable, optional, inconvenient. On October 22nd at 3:38 in the afternoon, I made 2 phone calls to the Mississippi Department of Corrections. By 3:41, I had recorded evidence of exactly how a government office protects itself when confronted with constitutional violations it doesn't want to fix. What you're going to hear isn't just bureaucratic incompetence. It's the sound of a system that is learned through practice, through repetition, through years of getting away with it. How to look like it's doing something while doing absolutely nothing. This is the story of a missing box. A simple metal box that costs maybe $50 and takes 20 minutes to install. And how the absence of that box enables abuse, silences victims, and makes the Constitution disappear behind prison walls. Let me set the scene for you. I've been investigating conditions at the Delta Correctional Facility for weeks. Multiple sources, consistent stories, and one problem that kept coming up. Prisoners at Delta have no way to file grievances confidentially, no way to request legal help without a guard watching, no way to report abuse without handing the complaint directly to the people they're complaining about. That's not a minor administrative issue. That's a constitutional violation. The Supreme Court said so in 1977 in Bounds v. Smith. Prisoners retain the right to access the courts. And in 1994, in Farmer v. Brennan, prison officials can't be deliberately indifferent to known risk of serious harm. So I picked up the phone and I called the commissioner's office. Got a woman who said, "This is the commissioner's office, sir. How can we help you?" And I told her everything. The missing boxes, the broken procedures, the fear of retaliation. I laid it out, point by point. Legal citations, policy references. I know this stuff. I've done this work. I understand what constitutional compliance looks like. I spoke for over a minute. Detailed, specific, verifiable. And when I finished, you know what she said? "Just a moment. This is a switchboard. Hold. And then, I need to send you to the commissioner's office. I was already talking to the commissioner's office. She had told me explicitly, "This is the commissioner's office." And after listening to documented constitutional violations for over a minute, her response was to send me to the commissioner's office. I said what anyone would say. "Jesus, you said it was the commissioner's office. Waste of my time." And that's where the first call ended. Routed to voicemail. A detailed report of systematic constitutional violations delivered to the appropriate office, acknowledged, and redirected into bureaucratic void. That's when I understood something. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't some receptionist having a bad day. This was the system, working exactly as designed. Absorb the complaint. Acknowledge just enough to seem responsive. Then make sure it never reaches anyone with the authority or the willingness to do anything about it. I called back. 3 minutes later, 3:41 p.m. But this time, I changed the script. So this is Don Matthews with We the People News. I'm going to run an article on this. If Burl Cain, the commissioner, doesn't get on the phone with me or call me back before 5 o'clock, I'm going to run an article. Watch what happens when you add accountability to the equation. The same office that had just routed me to voicemail suddenly started engaging. Not warmly, not enthusiastically, but substantively. Because now there was a deadline. Now there was public exposure. Now there were consequences. The woman asked, "Are you a news reporter, Don?" Not, "What's the problem?" Not, "Tell me more about these allegations," but, "Are you a news reporter?" That's threat assessment. That's an institution calculating what level of response is required. And folks, that calculation tells you everything about what motivates government action. Not the severity of the constitutional violation, not the urgency of the problem, but the potential for public embarrassment. I told her again, everything. The missing ILAP boxes. That's Inmate Legal Assistance Program. The absent grievance boxes. The mail system, where prisoners have to hand everything directly to guards. The fear of retaliation so pervasive that even people who haven't personally experienced problems are afraid to speak up. And this time, I got a different response. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you to our communications department. Of course, because when you have documented constitutional violations, the appropriate response is the communications department. Not investigation, not immediate corrective action, but public relations. I stopped her. "Listen, I wasn't calling asking you for comment. I was calling to report an issue." And finally, I got something resembling commitment. "I'll have them look into the ILAP procedure over at Delta Correctional," she said. Look into. Not investigate. Not fix. Not immediately ensure constitutional compliance. Just look into. She said it multiple times. "I will have someone look into it. I don't know if it's an issue or not, but I'll have someone look into it." Folks, after hearing detailed, specific allegations of constitutional violations I could cite chapter and verse from the Supreme Court precedent and MDOC's own internal policies. The official response was still, "I don't know if it's an issue or not." It's not uncertainty. That's plausible deniability. That's leaving yourself room to do nothing while appearing concerned. Let me tell you about my source. She's incarcerated at Delta Correctional Facility. She's never had problems with guards. No disciplinary issues. No personal grievances. She's not some troublemaker looking to cause problems. She's someone trying to survive her sentence and get home. And she's terrified to have her name attached to this report. Why? Because she knows, everyone knows, that speaking up inside a prison carries consequences. Even when you're reporting procedural violations that don't personally affect you. Even when you're just confirming that grievance boxes don't exist. Even when you're telling the truth that the system doesn't want told. I told the commissioner's office about this, about the fear, about a woman who has experienced no problems but understands that transparency is dangerous. And you know what that fear is? It's evidence. It testifies to the institutional culture at Delta Correctional Facility, more reliably than any policy manual would. In functional systems, reporting problems is encouraged. It's treated as quality control feedback. In dysfunctional systems, in abusive systems, reporting marks you as someone who doesn't understand the rules, the unwritten rules, the real rules, the rules that say keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, and don't make waves. When the commissioner's office representative finally understood what I was describing, she asked, "So the ILAP procedure, there's no box? They have to hand it to an actual correctional officer? Is that what you're saying?" Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Imagine you need to file a complaint about a guard. Maybe he's confiscated your legal materials. Maybe he's been verbally abusive. Maybe you witnessed him beat another inmate. You have the constitutional right to file a grievance. Mississippi Department of Corrections Policy 20-0-8 says so. The Supreme Court says so. But there's no box. There's no confidential submission system. There's no way to file your complaint without walking up to a guard, maybe the guard you're complaining about. Certainly, a guard who works with the guard you're complaining about, and handing it over while he watches, while he reads it, while he decides what happens next. That's not a grievance system. That's a retaliation delivery mechanism. I asked the questions that should embarrass every official at Mississippi Department of Corrections. All the money y'all pull in, y'all can't afford boxes at the units? Metal boxes with locks. Maybe $50 each. 20-minute installation. Zero ongoing maintenance. The absence of these boxes cannot be explained by budget constraints. It can only be explained by institutional choice. Someone, many someones, decided that functional grievance systems are not a priority. That prisoner complaints are nuisances to be managed, not addressed, or not feedback to be addressed. Near the end of our conversation, I said I want to speak to Commissioner Burl Cain. Burl Cain, Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, the man ultimately responsible for constitutional compliance at every facility under Mississippi Department of Corrections supervision. The person who should be most concerned when systematic violations are documented. The response: he's not in the office right now. Of course he's not. Commissioners are never in when accountability comes calling. They're available for ribbon cuttings, for legislative testimony about budget needs, for tough on crime press conferences. But when a journalist with a deadline wants to discuss constitutional violations, suddenly nobody's available. The representative said, "I'll pass him the message that you want to speak to him, but he's not in the office right now. But I wrote your number down. If he wants to speak to you, he'll call you back." If he wants to speak to you, not he will call you back, not he'll address this immediately, but if he wants to. Folks, I gave them until 5 o'clock. In fact, I gave them probably an extra day, well, close to an extra day. This was yesterday. My deadline was explicit. The article would run with or without Commissioner Cain's response. 5 o'clock came and went. No call. No follow-up. No statement from Commissioner Cain's office. Just silence. The kind of silence that communicates institutional priorities louder than any press release could. Let me be clear about something. I'm not making moral arguments here. I'm not appealing to compassion or decency, though those would be nice. I'm talking about constitutional law, binding Supreme Court precedent, requirements that aren't optional, negotiable, or subject to budget constraints. In 1977, the Supreme Court decided Bounds versus Smith. They held that prisoners must have meaningful access to the courts, not theoretical access, not access that exists in policy manuals, but meaningful, functional, realistic access. In 1996, Lewis versus Casey refined that standard. The court said prison officials can't erect procedural barriers that effectively nullify access rights. When the only way to file a legal assistance request is to hand it to a guard who might view your legal sophistication as a threat, that's not meaningful access. That's procedural barrier designed to discourage exercise of constitutional rights. In 1994, Farmer versus Brennan established the deliberate indifference standard. Prison officials violate the Eighth Amendment when they know about substantial risk of serious harm and choose to do nothing. As of October 22nd, at 3:41 p.m., Commissioner Burl Cain's office knows. They received detailed documentation. They acknowledged the problem. They promised to look into it. Every day, they fail to fix it. Every day, those boxes remain absent. The deliberate indifference becomes more deliberate. The constitutional violation becomes more flagrant. And here's the thing that should concern every Mississippian. Mississippi Department of Corrections has its own internal policy requiring this stuff. Policy 20-0-8, Administrative Remedy Program, mandates accessible, confidential grievance procedures. So this isn't even about MDOC disagreeing with constitutional requirements. They've acknowledged them. They've written them into internal policy. They just don't implement them. The policy exists to create plausible deniability. When sued, Mississippi Department of Corrections can point to policy 20-0-8 and say, see, we have procedures. But policy without implementation is fiction. It's a document that protects the institution while abandoning the prisoners. Delta Correctional Facility isn't unique. That's what makes this worse. You remember Parchman? Where they sent me? Mississippi State Penitentiary? The place that made national headlines for conditions so horrific that federal courts had to intervene. Where prisoners died from neglect, violence, and systematic indifference. Those weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of systemic MDOC dysfunction. And when Parchman got too much attention, when federal oversight became unavoidable, you know what happened? The problems didn't disappear. They migrated to quieter facilities, to places like Delta that don't attract headlines, to locations where systematic violations can continue without the inconvenience of federal monitors and consent decrees. That's sophisticated institutional strategy. When one facility faces scrutiny, you don't fix the system. You move the problem somewhere less visible. This is why my source's fear matters so much. She's at Delta, not Parchman. She has no personal grievances, but she knows, because everyone inside knows, that the same culture of retaliation and suppression exists. It's just quieter, more procedural, hidden behind absent boxes and missing infrastructure, rather than visible violence. During my call with the commissioner's office, the representative kept saying, I can't see what's going on at Delta. I don't know what's happening with the ILAP procedure out there. I have to have someone look into it. Can't see what's going on. That's willful blindness, codified as policy. The commissioner's office doesn't know about constitutional violations because knowing would require acting. Better to maintain strategic ignorance. Better to rely on looking into it than actually seeing. But here's what they can't claim anymore. They can't say they don't know. I told them in detail on recorded calls with legal citations and policy references and specific factual allegations. The ignorance defense died at 3:41 in the afternoon, October 22nd. Let me bring this back to what it actually means. Not legal theory, not policy analysis, but lived human reality. Right now, today. There's a man or woman at Delta Correctional Facility who needs to file a grievance. And maybe their medical requests are being ignored. Maybe a guard stole their property. Maybe they witnessed another prisoner being beaten and want to report it. They know they have rights. They read them in the inmate handbook. They've seen the policy posted on bulletin boards, on paper, that they can file a grievance. But when they try, they confront the reality. These phone calls document there is no box. So they have two options. Both of them terrible. Option one is to walk up to a guard, hand over their grievance, watch the guard read it, watch the guard's face change as he realizes this prisoner thinks they have rights. Watch the guard look at him differently, and then wait. Wait to see what form the retaliation takes. Lost work assignment, delayed mail, property mysteriously confiscated during the next shakedown, transfer away from that facility, from friends and support. 100 small ways to make life worse, none of them officially connected to that grievance. Option two, say nothing. Swallow the injustice. Accept that rights exist in theory, but not in practice. Become complicit in their own silencing. This is the choice that absent boxes create. This is what constitutional violations look like in human terms. And here's the cruelest part. Every prisoner who chooses silence teaches the next prisoner that silence is safer, just like cops that turn a blind eye. Every retaliation confirms that speaking up was a mistake. The system becomes self-perpetuating. The violations suppress the reporting mechanism. The absent reporting mechanism enables more violations. It's abuse architecture. Brilliantly simple. Devastatingly effective. $50. Got a call. That's what a locked metal grievance box costs. $50. 20 minutes installation time. MDOC's annual budget is over $300 million a year. Commissioner Kane's salary alone could buy thousands of these boxes. The cost is not the barrier. So what is? The only explanation that makes sense is that someone, many someones, benefit from the boxes not existing. Guards benefit. Without secure submission, they control which grievances get processed. That gives them the power beyond their formal authority. The prisoner who thinks about complaining must calculate. Will this guard even submit my grievance? Will he retaliate? Will he tell other guards that I'm a troublemaker? That discretion is a management tool. It creates dependency. Prisoners must stay in guards' good graces to access even basic procedural rights. Administrators benefit. Without functional grievance systems, problems don't generate documentation. Low grievance numbers can be presented as evidence that everything's fine, that facilities are well managed, that prisoners are content. The alternative, acknowledging that low numbers reflect suppressed reporting rather than absence of problems, would require uncomfortable institutional introspection. MDOC benefits. Every processed grievance creates paperwork. Investigation obligations. Response requirements. Appeal procedures. Potential legal exposure. It's easier to ensure grievances aren't filed than to process them properly. The institutional path of least resistance leads toward suppression rather than resolution. And who pays? The prisoners who can't safely report abuse. The citizens of the state of Mississippi whose tax dollars fund unconstitutional conditions. The Constitution itself, which becomes increasingly meaningless when its protections can be nullified by strategic infrastructure denial. So while I can't do it on this particular recording, I'm not set up to actually play the recording. I'm going to be publishing the article within the hour that's going to have this, actually both recordings. It will be on We the People News, www.wtpnews.org. And I'll also put it on my Linktree, which is linktree.com/WTP News, or you can type in linktr.ee/WTP News. But I want you to listen to it. All right? Particularly the second call, October 22nd at 3:41 p.m. The Commissioner's Office responding to documented constitutional violations. I want you to listen to the tone. Professional. Practice. Carefully calibrated to sound responsive without committing to anything concrete. I'll have someone look into it. Not, I'll personally investigate. Not, I'll ensure those boxes are installed by Monday. Not, this is unacceptable and we'll fix it immediately. She wouldn't even give me her name. The only thing, just someone will look into it. Listen to how every commitment gets hedged. Every statement of action gets qualified. Every moment that might create accountability gets deflected. When I pushed back when I said I wasn't asking for a comment, I was reporting an issue. Listen how quickly the conversation shifts to sending me to communications, to reframing this as a media inquiry rather than a constitutional violation. That's not accident. That's institutional muscle memory. That's what happens when a system has confronted external accountability many times and developed sophisticated techniques for managing it. The smooth transitions, the careful language, the practiced deflections. This isn't improvisation. It's a system that knows exactly how to look like it's doing something while doing absolutely nothing. And at the end, when I insisted on speaking with Commissioner Burl Cain, her saying he's not in the office right now, and will, if he wants to speak to me, he will call back. These recordings are evidence, not just of this particular conversation, but of institutional culture. They demonstrate how constitutional violations get maintained through bureaucratic architecture, how complaints get acknowledged but not addressed, how problems get looked into but never fixed. So where does this go? I've done my job. I've documented the violations. I've recorded the institutional response, as I like to say, the institutional rot. I've published the evidence. Now it's time for others to do theirs. First, Commissioner Burl Cain needs to respond, not through a spokesperson, not through the communications department, but personally, on the record, explaining exactly what's happening at Delta Correctional Facility and what he's going to do about it. He has my number. He's had it since October 22nd. The question is whether Mississippi's top correctional official cares enough about constitutional compliance to pick up the telephone. Second, civil rights attorneys need to look at this. The documented violations, the absent boxes, the systematically suppressed grievance access, the institutional indifference captured on recorded calls. That's the foundation for federal civil rights litigation. 42 U.S. Code Section 1983. Civil action for deprivation of rights. When government officials violate constitutional rights under color of law, citizens can sue for damages and injunctive relief. The recordings establish notice. The continued inaction establishes deliberate indifference. And that's the recipe for Eighth Amendment violations with teeth. Third, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division should investigate. Not just Delta, but the entire Mississippi Department of Corrections system. Because if Delta has these problems, and Parchman had these problems, and I can attest, as of January, still had them, the pattern suggests statewide systematic failure. The Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act authorizes the Department of Justice to investigate state facilities and sue for pattern or practice violations. Mississippi's corrections system has been on DOJ's radar before. Maybe it's time for more than radar. Fourth, Mississippi voters need to decide whether this is acceptable, whether the state that claims to be tough on crime should also be tough on the Constitution. Whether protecting prisoner rights matters, or whether we've decided that incarceration means civil death. Because here's the thing, folks. Constitutional rights don't stop at the prison gate. Prisoners are still citizens, still human beings, still protected by the same founding document that protects all of us. When we allow the government to violate prisoner rights with impunity, we're not just harming them. We're weakening the constitutional framework that protects everyone. So I'll close with this. If a prisoner has a constitutional right, but no safe mechanism to assert it, does the right exist in any meaningful sense? That's not a rhetorical question. That's the practical reality at Delta Correctional Facility right now. On paper, prisoners have rights. In the Inmate Handbook, in MDOC Policy 20-0-8, and Supreme Court precedent. The rights exist, but without boxes to submit grievances confidentially, without ILAP request mechanisms that don't require guard approval, without mail systems that don't route everything through custody staff, without the infrastructure that makes rights functional, those paper protections become constitutional fiction. Pretty words with no practical meaning. Delta's answer seems to be no. The right doesn't exist in any meaningful sense. It exists as appearance, as plausible deniability, as something to point to when sued, but not a lived reality. The Constitution's answer has to be different. Because if we accept that government can acknowledge rights while ensuring they cannot be safely exercised, then we've accepted that rights are optional, negotiable, subject to institutional convenience. And once you establish that principle for prisoners, the most politically powerless people in our society, how long before it expands? How long before other inconvenient rights become subject to the same procedural suppression? I want you to let that resonate for a second. So it's been a day now since I made the call. Been a day now since MDOC promised to look into it. But how long is too long when this is going on, and it's been going on for a long time? The silence from Jackson has been deafening. We've already dealt with the issue regarding the governor's mansion and the assault by the Mississippi State Trooper, the silence and the complicity out of the governor's office right there. No return phone call. No public statement. No announcement of corrective action. No evidence that anyone at Mississippi Department of Corrections has even bothered to verify whether the allegations are true. Just silence. Silence is a choice. And that choice tells us everything about institutional priorities. It tells us that prisoner rights rank low, that external accountability without enforcement power can be safely ignored, that the calculation is simple. Manage the media exposure. Wait for the news cycle to move on, and hope nobody follows up. Well, I'm following up. This story doesn't end with 2 phone calls and an article. It ends when those boxes get installed. When prisoners at Delta Correctional Facility can file grievances without fear. And not just there, but every prison under the MDOC supervision. When the Constitution stops being optional behind prison walls. Until then, I'll keep reporting. I'll keep documenting. I'll keep holding up the mirror until the people of Mississippi see exactly what their correction system has become. Because that's my job. Exposing the rot. Documenting the failures. Demanding accountability from institutions that would rather operate in darkness. The phone calls exposed the rot. Now it's time to see if Mississippi has the political will to clean it out. I'm Don Matthews with We the People News, and I'm not done asking questions. Thank you for tuning in. Share this message. I'm going to get this article published to the We the People News website with this video and the call recordings. It is now it looks like it's 4:20. All right, it'll be posted to We the People News before 5 o'clock. Actually, it'll probably be posted in the next 15 minutes or so. All right, go there. I'll also share it to YouTube as a post. I'll share it to Facebook as a post. If you haven't yet, go over and hit the subscribe button on the We the People News YouTube channel. I also have Exposing the Tyrants on YouTube. What I need to do as well, and I'm probably going to come back live here in a second. Well, I'm going to get the article published first, and then I'm going to come back live, and I'll remind you that I've posted the article. And when I come back live, we're going to read over this new motion, or this new opposition filed in the Louisiana federal court. Just travesty of justice going on right now. If you don't know, you need to get involved. You need to actually see what all is going on, because it doesn't just affect me. This is something that actually it's a big deal, and it's going to affect a lot of people if they're successful with this. They are stacking the deck, and they're trying to hide evidence. This is the biggest cover-up going on with the federal government, the U.S. Marshals, and the Department of Justice. I've exposed it, and they're trying to use a protective order to keep the truth suppressed so that the public doesn't know what they're doing. This ex parte communication scandal. So I'll be coming back live in a little bit, and I'll be reading that motion for protective order. All right. I appreciate y'all tuning in, and yeah, hope to see you on the next live stream.